High Administrator Du-hyun stood at the large window of the Galactic Council's main chamber. His dark eyes looked out at the countless stars. Behind him, 200 alien representatives from different worlds argued loudly about one thing: Earth. "They are too dangerous," shouted one representative, their blue scales shining under the bright lights. "Look at what they did to their own planet before they even reached space." "But they are also quick learners," said another, this one tall and thin like a reed. "They fixed many of their planet's problems in just 50 years. Do-hyun turned around slowly. He had watched humans for a long time. They worried him. No other species in the galaxy could adapt as fast as humans. No other species went from basic flight to space travel in less than 70 years. It was not normal. It was not safe. "The vote is clear," Du-hyun said in a calm voice. The room went quiet. 3/4 of the council agrees. Earth must be contained. He pressed a button on the large screen behind him. A picture of Earth appeared, beautiful and blue. Around it, red dots showed the places where they would put the barrier generators. "The barrier will go up tomorrow," he continued. "It will cover their entire solar system. Nothing will get in. Nothing will get out." An older representative stood up. "What about their colonies on Mars? And their moon base?" "All included," Du-hyun answered. "The barrier will keep everything inside. Their ships cannot break through it. Their weapons cannot damage it. They will stay on their Deathworld, where they belong." Some representatives looked confused. One raised a hand. "Why do you call Earth a Deathworld?" Do-hyun smiled slightly. "Because that is what it is. Think about it. Their world has huge storms that can destroy cities. It has earthquakes that can split the ground open. It has waters so deep and dark that even we cannot explore them. It has places so cold that blood freezes, and places so hot that metal melts. And yet," he paused, "and yet humans live in all these places. They even enjoy them." The room was very quiet now. Everyone understood. "Most species evolve on worlds that are calm and stable," Du-hyun explained. "But humans? They grew up on a planet that tries to kill them every day. And they survived. They got stronger. That is why they are dangerous. That is why we must contain them." The next day, 5,000 ships moved into position around Earth's solar system. Each one carried a piece of the barrier technology. Humans on Earth watched with fear and anger as strange ships filled their skies. On the main council ship, Du-hyun watched the screen as the barrier generators started working. Blue energy flowed between the ships, forming walls of light. The walls grew and connected, making a huge sphere around the entire solar system. Inside the barrier, human ships tried to fight back. Their weapons hit the barrier, but did nothing. Their strongest missiles exploded against it like raindrops on glass. Earth sent out messages, some angry, some begging, some trying to make deals. The council ignored them all. 3 hours later, the barrier was complete. Earth and its people were sealed away. The council ships turned around and left. Their job finished. In his private room, Du-hyun wrote in his official report, "The human containment is successful. They are sealed on their Deathworld, where they can no longer threaten galactic peace. This problem is now solved." He sent the report and sat back in his chair, feeling satisfied. Humans were now trapped in their own solar system, on their dangerous planet. The galaxy was safer. But as he looked out at the stars one last time, a small worry touched his mind. Had they forgotten something? He pushed the thought away. The barrier was perfect. The humans were contained. Nothing could go wrong. He was very, very wrong. Dr. Jae-yun Park's hands shook as she watched the news about Earth's containment on their station's main screen. Around her, 29 other scientists and researchers stood in silence. Their small research station, hidden deep within the ice moon of Proxima Centauri, suddenly felt very far from home. "They trapped everyone," whispered Ta-won, their chief engineer. His face was pale under the blue lights of their underground control room. our families, our friends, everyone. Jia took a deep breath. She had led this research team for 3 years. They were studying the strange radiation that came from the ice moon's core. The mission was supposed to be secret, hidden from other alien races who might steal their research. Now that secrecy might save them. "Listen to me, all of you," she said, standing straighter. "We have a choice to make. We can reveal ourselves to the council and beg for mercy. Or what?" asked Myray, their young security officer. "Or we stay hidden. We grow stronger. We find a way to help Earth." The room was quiet for a long moment. These people were scientists, not soldiers. But they were also humans, and humans never gave up. Hajun, their base director, stepped forward. "If we show ourselves now, the council will just extend the barrier to include us. We will lose our freedom, and Earth will lose its only hope." One by one, they all nodded. The decision was made. The next few months were hard. They worked day and night to expand their base inside the moon's ice caves. They used their mining robots to dig deeper, creating more rooms and labs. Their hydroponics gardens grew more food. Their recycling systems worked harder. But the hardest part was the silence. They couldn't send messages to Earth. They couldn't tell their families they were safe. They could only watch and wait. A year passed. Then 2. The small colony grew stronger. Some people fell in love. Babies were born. The first was young Mei, Jia-Yun's daughter. She was born in a room made of ice, under artificial lights, far from the world her parents came from. 5 years after the containment, their colony had grown to 50 people. Their secret base now had 3 levels, all hidden under the moon's icy surface. They built small ships that could move between the ice moon's deep caves without being seen. 10 years passed. The colony had 100 people. Their scientists made new discoveries about the moon's strange radiation. Their engineers built better machines. Their children grew up learning both science and survival. The council never found them. Sometimes alien ships passed through the system, but they never looked closely at the small frozen moon. Why would they? It was just ice and rock. Their scans showed no signs of life. But deep under the ice, humans were growing stronger. They were learning, building, planning. 20 years after Earth was sealed away, Jia-Yun stood in the new observation room with her daughter Young Mei, now a brilliant young physicist. They watched through their hidden telescopes as a council ship passed by their moon. "They think they won," Young Mei said quietly. "They think they contained us." Jia-Yun smiled. That was their mistake. They thought Earth was dangerous because of its storms and quakes and seas. But that's not what makes humans strong. "What does?" Young Mei asked, though she already knew the answer. "Hope," Jia-Yun said. "As long as we have hope, we keep trying. We keep fighting. We keep finding ways to survive." She looked at her daughter. "And now, after 20 years, I think we found something that might change everything." Young Mi nodded, her eyes bright. In her hand, she held a tablet showing their latest discovery about the moon's radiation. It was the key they had been waiting for. The council thought they had trapped humanity on a Deathworld. They didn't know that humans had turned another world, a frozen, lifeless moon, into a home. And soon, very soon, they would learn just how big their mistake had been. Chief Engineer Ta-Won Kim stared at the screen in his lab, checking his calculations for the 5th time. The numbers were still the same. His heart beat faster as he realized what this meant. "Young Mi," he called out, "come see this." Young Mi Park walked into the lab, her white coat marked with the Ice Moon Colony symbol. At 20 years old, she was their youngest physicist, but also one of their best. She looked at the screen and her eyes went wide. "The radiation from the moon's core," Ta-Won explained. "It matches the energy frequency of the barrier around Earth. Almost exactly." Young Mi moved closer to the screen. "And if it matches, we might be able to break it, Taiwan finished, or at least make holes in it. They took their discovery to the colony's main meeting room. Now, instead of 30 scared scientists, 300 confident colonists lived in their underground city. The room was full as Taiwan showed his findings. Jiayun Park, now the colony's head scientist, stood up first. Her hair had gray streaks now, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "How sure are you about this?" "Very sure," Taiwan said. "We've tested it on small force fields. The radiation disrupts them every time." Hajun, their colony director, spoke next. "The Council's barrier is much bigger than our test fields. How do we know this will work on it?" "We don't," Young Mai admitted. "Not yet, but we can find out." Mai Song, who had grown from a young security officer to their head of intelligence, stepped forward. She pressed a button, and a map appeared on the big screen. It showed Council ships and bases near their system. "The Council thinks they won," Mary said. "They're getting careless. Their patrols are less frequent. Their sensors don't scan as deeply. They think humans are safely locked away." She zoomed in on a small Council station. This outpost has a miniature version of the barrier technology. They use it to protect their fuel depot. If we can test our radiation on their barrier, we would know if it works on the big one. Taiwan finished. The room was quiet as everyone thought about this. They had lived in secret for 20 years, building their strength. Was it time to risk everything? Sun Hai Li, their chief science officer, raised her hand. "The Council's sensors are old. They haven't updated them because they think they don't need to. Our stealth technology is much better now. We could get close to that outpost without them seeing us." Hajun nodded slowly. "How long would it take to build a ship with the radiation equipment?" 3 months, Taiwan said. "Maybe less if everyone helps." 2 months, Young Mei corrected. "I have some ideas to make it faster." Hajun looked around the room. "This is dangerous. If we're caught, the Council will find our colony. Everything we've built here will be lost. If we do nothing," Jiayun said softly, "Earth stays trapped forever." One by one, people stood up. Engineers, scientists, farmers, teachers, everyone who had helped build their hidden world. They all stood, showing their support. Hajun smiled. "Then let's begin. But we do this carefully. We do this right." As the meeting ended, Taiwan looked at his old friend Jiayun. 20 years ago, you said we needed to grow stronger, to find a way to help Earth." Jiayun nodded. "And now we have." Far above their ice moon base, the stars shone coldly. The Council's ships passed by, never suspecting that beneath the frozen surface, humans were preparing to show the galaxy its biggest mistake. The countdown to freedom had begun. Intelligence Officer Mei Song moved silently through the deep ice tunnels. The colony had grown much larger than anyone had imagined 20 years ago. Where there were once just a few rooms, now there were entire districts carved into the moon's ice. She reached the new observation post, built inside a deep crack in the ice moon's surface. Through special windows that looked like ice crystals, they could watch Council ships without being seen. "Report," she said to the young officer on duty. 3 Council ships passed by today, the officer said. "They're still following the same patrol pattern. They don't even look at our moon anymore." Mei nodded. The Council's pride made them blind. They thought they had won, so they stopped looking for threats. That would be their downfall. In the main engineering bay, Taiwan and Young Mei worked on their new ship. They had named it Hope's Shadow. It was small, built to look like a piece of ice if anyone saw it. But inside, it held their greatest discovery, the radiation technology that might break Earth's barrier. "The radiation chambers are ready," Young Mei said, checking her screens. "We can start testing tomorrow." Taiwan looked at the ship with pride. 20 years ago, we could barely keep our lights on. Now look at what we can build. In another part of the colony, Hojub met with the colony's council. The room was no longer just a meeting place. It was a command center. Maps showed council movements. Screens displayed information from their hidden sensors throughout the star system. The ship will be ready in 1 week, He-Jun said. Then we can test our theory on the council's outpost. Sun Hai-Li, their chief science officer, spoke up. Our stealth systems are better than ever. We've tested them against the council's newest sensors. They can't see through our ice camouflage. Jia-Yun, who now had gray hair but the same determined eyes, looked at the plans. We've waited 20 years for this chance. We can't rush it now. Suddenly, alarms flashed silently on their screens. A large council ship was approaching their system. It was bigger than the usual patrol ships. Everyone held their breath as they watched the ship on their hidden cameras. It moved slowly, scanning the system. Myre's team tracked its every move. The ship paused near their moon. For a moment, everyone was completely still. 2 decades of work could be lost if they were discovered. But their preparations worked perfectly. The ice moon looked empty to the council's scans. The ship moved on, continuing its patrol. That was too close, He-Jun said quietly. No, Myre corrected him. That was perfect. Now we know our stealth systems work even against their biggest ships. In the deepest part of the colony, young Mei worked late into the night. The radiation chamber hummed softly as she made final adjustments. On her screen, she watched the energy patterns that matched the council's barrier. We're almost ready, she whispered to herself. Just a little longer, Earth. We haven't forgotten you. Above the colony, the ice moon continued its quiet orbit. It looked dead and frozen, just another lifeless rock in space. But inside, humans worked, planned, and prepared. The council thought they had contained humanity's strength. Instead, they had forced it to grow in secret, like a fire burning beneath the ice. The time for hiding was almost over. Sub-Administrator Yunwu sat in his command chair aboard the council patrol ship Star Watcher. His job was simple: check the outer systems for any unusual activity. It was usually quiet work. Nothing interesting had happened in this sector for 20 years, not since Earth was contained. Administrator, one of his crew called out. Our sensors are picking up strange energy readings. Yunwu moved to the sensor station. The screen showed unusual patterns coming from one of the ice moons in the Proxima Centauri system. He had passed this moon many times before, but something was different today. Run a deep scan, he ordered. Inside the human colony, alarms flashed silently on Myre's screens. She immediately contacted He-Jun and the others. A council ship is scanning us, she reported. They've detected something. In the engineering bay, Young Lai and Taiwan rushed to shut down their radiation tests. They had been preparing the Hope's Shadow for its first flight, but the tests had released more energy than they expected. Stealth systems at maximum. Sun Hai ordered through the colony's communication system. Everyone to your emergency stations. The colony went dark. Only essential systems stayed on. 300 people moved quickly and quietly to their assigned places, just as they had practiced many times. On the council ship, Yunwu frowned at his screen. The energy readings were fading. What did the deep scan show? Nothing unusual, his sensor officer reported. The moon appears to be solid ice, with some natural radiation from its core. But for a moment, the radiation pattern was strange. Strange how? Yunwu asked. It almost looked like. The officer paused. Like the energy pattern of our barrier technology. But that's impossible. This is just a frozen moon. Yunwu looked at the moon through his ship's windows. It looked completely dead. But something bothered him. He had served on the containment fleet 20 years ago. He remembered the energy readings from Earth's barrier. Send a report to Central Command, he decided. Mark it as low priority, but include all sensor data. In the colony's command center, Myre's team recorded every word of the council ship's communications. He-Jun and Jia-Yun listened carefully. They noticed something, He-Jun said quietly. After all these years, They finally noticed something. But they're not sure what they saw, Jai-yun pointed out. And they're not treating it as important. Young Mai arrived from the engineering bay. The radiation leak was my fault. I was trying to increase the power output, but the containment field wasn't strong enough. Can you fix it? He-jun asked. Already done, she answered. Next time, they won't detect anything. The council ship stayed for another hour, running more scans. But the colony's stealth systems worked perfectly. All they could see was ice and rock. Finally, Yunwoo gave the order to move on. As his ship left the system, he looked one last time at the ice moon. Something wasn't right, but he couldn't prove it. Maybe he was just being paranoid after 20 years of boring patrol duty. In the colony, people returned to their work. The close call had scared them, but it had also taught them something valuable. Now we know our stealth systems work, Sunhee said, but we also know they can detect our radiation tests if we're not careful. How long until the ship is ready? He-jun asked. 3 days, Young Mai answered. We'll be more careful with the tests. They won't detect us again. Above them, the ice moon looked as lifeless as ever. The council ship's report would sit unread in a database, marked as unimportant. By the time anyone thought to look at it again, it would be too late. The humans had won their first real test. They had remained hidden. But now they knew they needed to move quickly. The council's attention had been caught, even if just for a moment. The time for waiting was over. Military Commander Jamin walked through the colony's new shipyard, hidden deep within the ice moon's largest cave. The hoped shadow was ready for its first real mission. 2 more ships stood nearby, nearly complete. They had named them Silent Dawn and Icebreaker. All systems are green, Young Mai reported, checking the ship's controls. The radiation chamber is working perfectly now. No leaks, no unusual signals. Jamin nodded. He had been training pilots and crew members for months. They weren't soldiers. They were scientists, engineers, and colonists. But they had learned quickly, just as humans always did. In the command center, Mirei showed He-jun and Jai-yun the latest intelligence reports. The council's outpost is following its normal routine. Their barrier is active, protecting their fuel depot. It's the perfect target for our first test. What about patrols? He-jun asked. 1 ship visits every 3 days. We'll have a 48-hour window between visits, more than enough time to test our radiation technology and leave without being noticed. Jai-yun studied the plans carefully. If this works, if we can break through their small barrier, then we can break the big one around Earth. Young Mai finished, entering the room. The energy patterns are identical. If we can disrupt one, we can disrupt both. The colony leaders gathered around a large table. The mission plans were displayed on screens around them. Every detail had been checked and double-checked. We launch in 12 hours, Jamin said. The crew is ready. The ship is ready. Sunhee raised her hand. I've improved the ice camouflage system. Even if someone looks right at the ship, they'll only see a small piece of ice floating in space. Taiwan spoke next. The radiation chamber can run at full power for 6 hours. That should be enough time to test it on the barrier and collect all the data we need. He-jun looked at each person in the room. These were no longer the scared scientists who had hidden 20 years ago. They were stronger now, smarter, ready. This is what we've worked for, he said quietly. Everything we've built, everything we've learned. It all comes down to this mission. Young Mai would pilot the ship herself. She knew the radiation technology better than anyone. Her mother, Jai-yun, hugged her tightly before she boarded. Be careful, Jai-yun whispered. I will, Young Mai promised. When I return, we'll finally have a way to help Earth. The Hope's shadow waited in its launch bay, dark and sleek. Its surface looked like ice, reflecting the lights just as the moon's surface did. The crew of 6 took their positions. In the control room, He-jun gave the final order. Begin launch sequence. The huge ice doors above the ship opened slowly, revealing the star-filled sky. No one watching would notice. It would look like just another crack appearing in the moon's icy surface. Young May's hands were steady on the controls as the ship lifted off. 20 years of preparation had led to this moment. They would test their technology, gather their data, and return unseen. Then they would begin building the fleet that would free Earth. The Hope's shadow rose silently from the ice moon's surface, carrying humanity's future with it. The real test was about to begin. Young May guided the Hope's shadow carefully through space. The ship moved silently, looking like nothing more than a chunk of ice. Behind her, 5 crew members monitored their systems. No one spoke. They all knew how important this mission was. The Council's outpost appeared ahead of them. It was small, with only a few buildings protected by a blue energy barrier. This was their target. If they could break this small barrier, they could break the big one around Earth. "Barrier is active," reported Sunhai from her station. "Energy pattern matches our data exactly." Young May moved the ship closer. Their ice camouflage worked perfectly. The outpost's sensors didn't even notice them. "Starting radiation sequence," Ta-1 said. He had helped build the radiation chamber, and now he would help test it. Power at 20%. The ship hummed softly as the radiation began to flow. They watched as it hit the Council's barrier. At first, nothing happened. 40% power, Ta-1 called out. The barrier flickered slightly. Everyone held their breath. 60%. The blue energy wall began to wave, like water in the wind. 80%. A small hole appeared in the barrier. It was working. Full power. The radiation burst forth at maximum strength. The hole grew larger, then larger still. The Council's barrier, which was supposed to be unbreakable, was failing. Suddenly, alarms began to sound at the outpost. They had finally noticed something was wrong. "We have the data we need," Sunhai said quickly. "The radiation works. We should leave." But Young May didn't move the ship. "Wait," she said. "Look at their communications." The outpost was sending emergency signals, not to nearby patrol ships, but to Earth. They were asking the barrier control stations there what was happening to their power system. Young May smiled. "They don't know it's us. They think something is wrong with their own technology." The crew watched as the outpost's barrier collapsed completely. The Council workers ran around in confusion, trying to fix what they thought was a technical problem. "Time to go," Young May said. She turned the ship around smoothly. By the time Council patrol ships arrived to help the outpost, the Hope's shadow was far away. Once again, just another piece of ice floating in space. They returned to the colony as heroes. The mission had succeeded better than anyone had hoped. The radiation technology didn't just work, it had fooled the Council completely. In the main control room, Hajum called an emergency meeting. Every colony leader attended. "The test was perfect," Young Mai reported. "The radiation can break their barriers, and they don't suspect a thing." "How long until we can attack the main barrier around Earth?" Jamin asked. Tai-1 checked his calculations. "We need at least 15 ships, each with a radiation chamber. With the whole colony working, we can build them in 2 months." "Build 20," Hajun ordered. "We need to be sure." The colony burst into action. The shipyards worked day and night. Every engineer, every scientist, every worker focused on one goal: building the fleet that would free Earth. And on Earth itself, the first signs of change appeared. The barrier flickered in strange ways. The Council workers couldn't explain it. They didn't know that their perfect prison was about to fall. The humans were coming home. High Administrator Du-hyun stood at the same window where he had watched Earth being sealed away 20 years ago. But today, something was very wrong. The barrier around Earth was failing. Not in one place, but in 20 different spots. "How is this possible?" he demanded. The Council chamber was in chaos. Representatives from 100 worlds shouted and argued. "The barrier generators are working perfectly," one technician reported. But something is disrupting the energy field. We've never seen anything like it. Suddenly, the chamber's main screen lit up. A transmission was breaking through the confusion. The image showed a woman with gray-streaked hair standing in a room made of ice. "I am Dr. Jae-yun Park," she said calmly. 20 years ago, you thought you contained humanity on what you called a Deathworld. You made 2 mistakes. Do-hyun stared at the screen. This was impossible. All humans were supposed to be trapped on Earth. Your first mistake, Jae-yun continued, was thinking Earth made us strong. You were wrong. It wasn't the storms or the earthquakes or the deep oceans that made humans special. It was our ability to adapt, to learn, to survive anywhere. The screen split, showing 20 ships appearing around Earth's barrier. They looked like they were made of ice. Your second mistake was not counting all of us. You missed our small research station, hidden on an ice moon. We stayed hidden. We grew stronger. We learned. And now, we're taking down your barrier. Do-hyun watched in shock as the 20 ships activated their radiation chambers. The barrier around Earth began to break apart. "This is impossible," he whispered. "That barrier was perfect." "Nothing is perfect," Jae-yun said. "That's something humans understand very well." In Earth's orbit, General Jin-ho of the Earth Defense Force watched as the mysterious ships broke through the barrier. At first, he prepared to fight them. Then he received a message from one of the ships. "This is Young-mi Park," the message said. "We're the children of the Ice Moon Colony. We've come to free Earth." Earth's ships moved to help the ice ships. Together, they attacked the barrier generators. The Council's perfect prison began to fall apart. Back in the Council chamber, Do-hyun faced the truth. Humanity had not been contained. They had grown stronger in secret, and now they were showing what they could really do. "Stop them," someone shouted. "Send the fleet." "It's too late," Do-hyun said quietly. "Look." The barrier was completely gone. Earth was free. And now the Council had to face not just Earth's humans, but also the ones who had built a civilization inside an ice moon. Jae-yun's image appeared again. "We don't want revenge," she said. "We want recognition. Humanity is ready to join galactic society. But we join as equals, not as prisoners." The Council chamber was silent. Do-hyun looked at the images of the ice ships, at the free Earth, at the woman who had led her people in secret for 20 years. "You tried to contain us because you feared our strength," Jae-yun said. "Instead, you forced us to become even stronger. Now shall we talk about humanity's place in the galaxy?" Do-hyun looked around the Council chamber. Every representative knew they had no choice. Humanity had proven itself. "Welcome," he said finally, "to the Galactic Council." Above Earth, the ice ships and Earth ships flew together in formation. The barrier was gone. The stars were open to humanity once again. And this time, no one would try to contain them. They had proven what humans did best: adapt, survive, and come back stronger than ever.